Hi, I'm S.O.S and I'm going to critique a video by Jeff Nippard debunking some of the things about how much muscle you can build naturally. I'm not going to attack Jeff, I'm going to critique the information, the misinformation, and give some realistic accuracies in how much muscle you can build naturally without taking steroids. It's going to be constructive, accurate and factual information. So let's have a look at the introduction of his video.
In this video, I'm going to tell you exactly how much muscle it's possible to build naturally and how much muscle it's possible to build using steroids by looking at real-world examples and scientific studies.
I find it really hard to watch these fitness YouTubers talking to millions of people in front of their computer, making out like they're natural and that they can put on a huge amount of muscle. Jeff Nippard has said that he's put on 27 pounds or 12 kilos of muscle naturally without drugs. People that put on this amount of muscle probably are microdosing over many periods of years, and they take a little bit of steroids and it makes them bigger and bigger every single month, every single year. He believes you can bulk and cut for 5 to 10 years and still put on 20 to 40 pounds of muscle. That's a huge discrepancy of 100%. Let's look at BMI and muscle mass. So for my first study entitled Accuracy of Body Mass Index in Diagnosing Obesity in the Adult General Population, it showed that body mass index has a good correlation with body fat, but it has a low sensitivity of 50% to obese people because they have a lot of internal fatness. It's slightly misleading, BMI is slightly misleading for athletes and bodybuilders, but they're in the minority. For the vast majority of the average people, body mass index is a very good indicator for assessing death, illness and cardiovascular diseases. Study number 2, for example, my body mass index chart from my Fat Loss S.O.S course, it shows that I'm pretty much overweight at 24.6 of the BMI. Athletes and bodybuilders will be overweight in the overweight and obese categories because they have more muscle mass than is naturally possible to attain for their size and frame. So they would come in a higher level, and this increases their chances of getting cardiovascular disease. Okay, then I look at study 3 entitled Body Mass Index and Mortality in a very large cohort. Is it really healthier to be overweight? Again, this study shows that BMI is a highly accurate way of diagnosing the general population. They diagnosed 274,000 people and found that people that are underweight, overweight and obese had vastly increased risk of cardiovascular disease, and so body mass index is an accurate tool. Study 4 entitled BMI and all-cause mortality, systematic review and non-linear dose response meta-analysis of 230 cohort studies with 3.74 million deaths among 30.7 million participants. This shows that the lower the risk of illness and death was observed with body mass index between 20 and 22, which is bang in the middle of the normal range. So again, body mass index is highly accurate. For the majority of people it's accurate, but for steroid users, again, if they do a body mass index, they'll be overweight or obese. You just can't get in the overweight and obese categories without being drug-free. Okay, let's look at study 5 entitled Body Mass Index Categories and Mortality Risk in US Adults, the effects of overweight and obese on advancing death. The study found that obese patients on the BMI scale had a 20% increase of dying of all-cause mortality in cardiovascular disease if they were found in the overweight or obese categories, and there's 3 obese categories. So body mass index is accurate, but not for fitness influencers that are on drugs. So you can tell who's on steroids if they're overweight on the BMI scale. So now let's look at body fat percentage and muscle mass. So study 6 shows my Fat Loss S.O.S body fat percentage classification chart that I used for my course. My body fat is around 8% all year round. It's very low. As a natural, you want your body fat percentages to be in the athletic and normal fitness range, which is between 10 and 17%. Study 7 shows my Fat Loss S.O.S target body fat percentage for finding target body weight chart. I've highlighted my current body weight. At the moment it's 78 kilos. I'm normally around 80 kilos, but my current body fat is about 8% and my fat-free mass index is 22.6, which is below the 24-25% cutoff rate for steroids. Jeff mentions that if your fat-free mass index is above 25, then you're on steroids, because the calculation makes it impossible to be heavier with weight and a lot of muscle mass and have a very low body fat and be above 25 on the calculation of the fat-free mass. Study 8, entitled Fat-Free Mass Index in Users and Non-Users of Anabolic Androgenic Steroids, compared steroid users and drug-free non-users. They calculated that if your fat-free mass index is 25 or below, you're drug-free, and if it's 24, 25 or above, then you're on steroids, and this is still being very lenient. All the steroid users in the study were above 25 on the fat-free mass index because they can attain higher muscle mass for their height and body fat levels, and you can't attain that naturally. So getting a bodybuilder like Jeff or others to take a fat-free mass index test will show that they're at least 25 or 24 and 25 or higher. Study 9, entitled Fat-Free Mass Index as a Surrogate Marker of Appendicular Skeletal Muscle Mass Index for Low Fat Muscle Screening in Sarcopenia. It shows that the fat-free mass index is strongly correlated with the bioelectrical impedance analysis, where you put your hands and feet on bioimpedance scales, and the dual energy x-rays, and it shows that the fat and mass levels are very accurate, and so the fat-free mass index is accurate and a reliable test. Okay, effects of testosterone on muscle mass. Study 10 entitled The Effects of Superphysiologic Doses of Testosterone on Muscle Size and Strength in Normal Men. It took 43 men, put them into 4 groups: 1 no exercise, 2 testosterone without exercise, 3 placebo with exercise, and 4 testosterone plus exercise for 10 weeks. The men given testosterone without exercise still increased muscle mass by 3 kilos. Those given testosterone plus exercise doubled that, and they gained 6 kilos of muscle mass. So men given testosterone with no exercise still gain muscle mass 3 kilos just from not doing any exercise. So there's just no evidence, and the paucity of evidence in the literature, that drug-free men and women can gain 20 to 40 pounds of muscle, pure muscle. There's just not in the literature, and this study shows that that's the case. With the testosterone and no exercise, men increased their squat by 20% and bench press by 10%. The testosterone plus exercise men increased their squat by 38% and bench press by 22%. So even with no exercise and testosterone, your bench press can still go up 10% and your squat by 20%. So without exercising, taking no testosterone, you hardly put on any muscle mass or weight compared to the ones doing no exercise and taking testosterone, and the ones taking testosterone and exercise to do even better. Think about it. How would a drug-free person put on 40 pounds or 20 kilos of muscle without drugs with these figures? It just doesn't make any logical sense. Fitness influencers lie to you all the time about their gains. Okay, let's look at energy surplus to maximize muscle. Is an exercise surplus required to maximize muscle skeletal hypertrophy associated with resistance training? They found that there's no benefit to an energy surplus to maximizing muscle, especially if you're drug-free. The bulk and cut method that Jeff talks about in his video is a myth. It's based on steroid users who can use the additional calories and use that as muscle protein synthesis to carry on for a week of still building muscle and using that energy. But when you're drug-free, all that happens is you put on fat to bulk, and when you cut back, you lose your muscle that you put on, which would be hardly anything. Let's look at how much pure muscle you can put on from resistance training. So study 12, entitled A Systematic Review with Meta-Analysis of the Effect of Resistance Training on Whole Body Muscle Growth in Healthy Adult Males. This study showed that an average of 1.5 kilos of pure muscle mass can be added to your frame for a non-steroid user. That's hardly anything. But remember, this takes into account genetics, age, sex, training intensity, nutrition, and overall lifestyle. Why do people and YouTube fitness influencers lie about their steroid use? Several reasons I've come up with. One is legal concerns. So in the US, steroids are illegal, whereas in the UK and parts of Europe and Australia, steroids aren't illegal, you can take them, so you can be more open about talking about it online. Financial gain, so many fitness influencers make a living off being sponsored by various companies, and if they admit to taking steroids, then the supplement companies may take away their sponsorship. There's also social stigma, so admitting to using steroids may lead to other people judging them. Rather than judging them as a person, they judge them for using steroids and cheating. A lot of fitness influencers have personal insecurities, low self-esteem. They feel that they want to look a certain way and it's part of their identity. So this leads to taking more and more drugs to get bigger and bigger. So to wrap this up and conclude, instead of obsessing over how much weight and size you can put on being drug-free, forget about that. Focus on improving your training programs, being highly consistent with your training. If you want to look better, you can be more athletic, and that you can achieve great results like I do, being drug-free. Don't take steroids, they ruin your life, they ruin your mind. Just be happy and stay fit and stay healthy. If you want, look athletic as well. You can do it without steroids. Don't go down that road.